Hey chat, let me know if you guys are there. How are you guys doing today? If you're in the chat, let me know. And then just tell me if my mic levels are okay for you. I was setting up a different mic today, so let me know if they peak and clip at all, because I need to know. So if you sit and you're watching, just put, just tell me in the chat. Just 1 second here, guys, and we'll get started. All right, cool. So let's start, with their questions. I believe they're all downloaded. Where did I put them? That's not it. Let me just double check here. Oh, dang. Hold on 1 second, guys. Something went wrong. Looks like it's going to be one at a time. What a pain. Yeah, let me check something. Sorry, guys. 1 second. All right, I got it to re-download. So while that is happening, let's go ahead and talk. Hey, Sarah. Let's go ahead and talk, kind of recap what we did last class. So we were talking about the principles of animation, and we started off with bounce, right? A heavy bounce with technically with weight and mass. In fact, this should probably say that. Let me just change this to, if it says weight or mass, I don't care. Or if it says bounce, I mean, I'm not gonna be that upset about it. I just, for my own reasons, just want to get that changed. Control, double click on that, center it, save it, align it. There we go, perfect. Unlock that layer. All right, so we spoke about one of the principles of animation, which is weight, right? And then we created a heavy bounce versus a light bounce. And we added some, after we worked, with the curves and stuff, we added some motion blur into it. And this was the end result of that particular section of the principles of animation. Now today we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on squash and stretch. I mentioned last class that for sake of keeping the scene kind of clean, we don't want it to say squash and stretch. Just saying squash or stretch, either one, that's fine. Just one, light title in the back, or one title in the background. One word title is okay. And then we're going to talk about impact. And I don't have this one set up quite yet for you guys for a reason. I'm going to show you guys how to kind of draw, using the drawing tools a little bit more inside of After Effects. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that today. And, let's just kind of get into this right now, and then I can end the class with your guys' questions. I think that will be possibly more time efficient today. I did want to mention a couple things to you guys. One being, we're coming up on spring break in about a month, right? So if you guys are really far behind on work right now, this might be kind of a cutoff point where you decide, hey, do I want to continue going in the class or not? You guys really got to start getting things caught up if you're really far behind, because it's just going to get even more complex. The work's going to get more complex, and it's just going to take more and more time. And after you compound time so much, there's nothing you can do to stay ahead of it. So I suggest that if you are in that position, you guys might want to think about that. And you can always message me and we can talk and try and figure it out. But now is an appropriate time to start evaluating that. And then also, every year there's something in the art department called Artist of Promise, and it is where we collect the best work within certain categories, and it is, there's people look at it and decide who is the best and what they want to use. And so we have a category for animation specifically, and so not next week, but the week after, we're going to be working on an animation where we combine multiple scenes together. And those are something that you guys might want to think about possibly submitting if you want to try, go for the Artist of Promise. I think that that's awesome, and then I'll leave a little bit of time after that specific lesson to do some a critique. We'll maybe have a shorter class where it's just critiques, and then go forward from there. And so I'm going to kind of split up how I normally would have this class laid out. Normally we're going to go into the principles of animation with 3D next week. And then after that is when we're going to get into that bigger project there. And normally it wouldn't come for a few more weeks after that, but since spring break's coming up and everything else, I want to give you guys the opportunity to have that chance to submit your work, because that's important. So let's go ahead and talk about squash and stretch. So before let's go back real quick and talk about the squashing and stretching that we did with the 2D hand-drawn animated ball. And then also with the, we did a little bit of squashing with our 3D ball in Cinema 4D. And here today, what I'm going to show you is how to add squash and stretch inside of After Effects using two different techniques. One of the techniques that we're going to be using is going to be path animation. And the other one that we are going to use is just with the transform tools. Now, the path animation one is going to be closest kind of to the Adobe Animate, the hand-drawn ball. And That one takes a little bit more finesse and a little bit more patience, and also kind of more of a keen eye for the detail in that one, because we are going to be manipulating the path of the circle itself. We'll get more to that in just a second, but let me real quick open something up. Perfect. Awesome. So just real quick that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. All right, so that you guys know, we're going to do path animation. And then using the transform. The transform properties. So which would be scale, right? Because scale is only, there's position, rotation, scale, opacity. Now, you're not going to be able to manipulate the ball, like squashing and stretching it with anything else, right? Like rotating it's not going to do that. It's just pointless to even talk about it. The only thing that's going to do it is the scaling. Now, either way is not wrong. You can use either technique. And it really just kind of is a different style. You're going to see that here once we get animating. But, you know, if later on down in your career you decide you like to do one versus the other, which I promise you, you will use both of them multiple times. But when using, you know, you can choose which way you want to do it. But this is a great chance for you to see just two different ways. I know I feel like I'm repeating myself. My brain's a little bit distracted today, so I apologize ahead of time. So let's just get into it. Right here, I have two different balls set up. This one, I renamed the layer down at the bottom to path animation, and then one ball transform animation, okay? So that way you guys know which is which. In fact, I'm going to change the layer color so that it matches with the ball, so that I can just kind of automatically see and understand which one I'm going to do. I'll just put blue for that one. Actually, that one we're going to want to see it. This will be important when it comes to path animation, right? If you look up here, nope, I don't want to do that. If you look at the ball quickly, you notice that it's kind of hard to see the little points right here where it's just kind of showing you your like layer outline essentially. When it comes to path animations, you really want to make sure, oh no, come on. There we go. Sometimes that thing can be finicky. I'm almost like tempted not to use it. But when you have path animations, you want to make sure that you are able to see those lines specifically. And so I'm going to actually change that one to something brighter. So when I click on it, I'm able to easily pick it out and manipulate those paths. Let's lock that title. And let's start with the transform ball. Great. I did it opposite. Let me rename these so they are in the order I would like. Enter. These can be on either side. It doesn't matter to me, but I just don't want to. It's just easier for me right now to change the title than move the position of the balls because I already have them where I want them. Okay, let's save that. So we're going to start with the transform animation, and we are going to, like we have been doing before, we're going to hit P on the keyboard, and we are going to separate the dimensions, and then only keyframe the Y position. And I'm going to move ahead 12 frames. I realized something no, let's do it this way. And then I'll show you why it's wrong, actually. So then we are going to drop the ball down. bring it to 800 again, because I like that even number. Now these don't have to exhibit weight, right? They can just exhibit a bounce. We want it to be a continuous bounce. So I'm going to copy and paste that first keyframe so that it is a bounce like this, right? And I'm going to just shorten that playback area. I am not going to do that. Actually, I am going to move 12 frames. 12 frames, and then I'm going to copy and paste that again. Just because I want to like continuous bounce, right? Starting up at the same direction. There we go. Okay, there we have like a loop, right? So the ball's bouncing. We're going to block out the animation before we start easing anything. So I'm going to hit U on the keyboard just to bring up only the Y position. And then we're going to hit Shift S and we're going to bring up the scale. Now, when I transform the scale of the ball right now, if I were to do it, it's at 100, 100. The scale is right now. It is locked together. Whoop, there we go. You see this little icon here? That's a linking icon. That means when you change one value, when it looks like that, when you change one value, the other value inherently changes with it. So you can unlink that and you can change the value and you can lock it up again, right? Like if you want the ratios to be different for some reason, or the values to be different, you can do that. But the nice thing about this right now is we want to unlock it and leave it unlocked because we are going to manipulate. At this moment, we can change either the X or the Y value of that scale. And so we are going to keyframe that. But we're going to move that keyframe, right? Because remember when we did it with the Cinema 4D ball, and we wanted to make sure that that keyframe was close to when the ball hit the ground, right? Because you don't want the squash happening too early. So we want to move that keyframe over to this area. Let me zoom in on the timeline here. There we go. And let's change that squash. We want to kind of squash the ball down. So we're going to change that Y value. Let's change it down to like 70%. It's not a bad squash. And then we'll move over another few frames. And then we'll add another keyframe. So here's another way that you can add a keyframe. If you want, you can just click this little button here, which adds an additional keyframe. And that will keep it. Notice though, that will just add a keyframe at whatever value you're at after the most recent keyframe, right? If that makes sense. So we changed the scale value here to 70. And if I move over there and hit that keyframe button, it's going to stay at 70 because I haven't changed a value. And then you can change a value, right? You can do it either way. Just another technique for you guys to know. But you notice like now if I play it back, the squash it's like consistently squashed, right? So we have to still add a couple keyframes before and after the squash happens to make sure that it's at 100% until we're ready to start squishing it. So I'm going to move, let's go 1, 2 keyframes before, and I'm going to put this back at 100%. And then I'm going to move 2 keyframes after, and then I'm going to put it back at 100% again. And we're just going to actually watch this bounce happen. I'm going to hit in there, drag that over. Let's see if it still works that way. Because if so, I'm just going to delete those other keyframes. All right. We got a bounce going here. And a squashing and stretching. Oh, didn't mean to delete that last one. I'm just, for you guys to know, I'm just going to delete those 2 keyframes so I can just kind of loop the playback with the, just in the work area. And then what I can do is add more bounces later, or I can take this composition and stack it and remember, like, place them, sequence them together, right? And so I have a bounce and a squash happening here, but it's doesn't look good. Sarah, do you know why it doesn't look good if you're in the chat? Let me just check here. Okay, well, let me stop playing. So the reason it doesn't look good is because the squash is happening from the center of the ball. And we don't want that to happen. We want the squash to happen from the bottom of the ball, right? It happens when it hits the ground. And that's where the squash actually occurs, is when the ground and the ball make contact. The squash and scaling doesn't actually feel like, the squash doesn't actually, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry, guys. It's because I read Sarah's comment, and Sarah's actually very right. But the squash doesn't start from the center of the ball. This is where my train of thought was going, right? It doesn't just squish from the middle of the ball. It squishes when it hits something. And then that's where the motion actually occurs. And so that's what I was saying was wrong in the beginning, is I realized I started animating this and my anchor point was in the incorrect space. So we're going to just, I'm going to hit V on here. I'm going to take all these keyframes. I'm going to delete them, right? Because we want them. I'm actually going to go to the beginning here. Then I'm going to delete all these keyframes because we want to make sure that we start animating this ball with the anchor point in the correct position automatically from the jump start, right? And so I am going to, normally, right, I said you could control and double click and it would put the anchor point in the center, which is right. You can't, you can grab this anchor point as well, and then you're going to hold down shift and you'll drag it to the bottom, and then it'll snap to that bottom like key point. So I'm going to click the anchor point tool. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm just going to, the best I can, put it right down at the bottom of the ball. And in fact, I'm going to do that right here as well on this ball because we want the animation to be driven in the same way. This one's going to be a little bit different, and I'll explain that later. Now, one thing that Sarah mentioned about the animation was that it felt like it squished too early. Very true. It did squish too early. And that also, it was a little too slow, which was also true. And so we will, when we get into placing these keyframes on here, we're going to do it properly the first time. And we'll be able to adjust the timing later. But yeah, you were very right. It was too slow. The squashing was happening way too early. It should happen like pretty much right when it hits the ground. And you can have a little pre-squash in there, right? But visually, if you can see it happen before, then it's not going to be effective, right? People are going to be like, well, why is that ball starting to deform before it actually hits anything? People will notice that. And so we are going to, we'll fix that. We're going to block out the animation. Remember what that means? Blocking out is like essentially laying down all your keyframes to get the gist of the motion down right away, or like just the blocked out sections of the motion down. And then what we're going to do is we are going to finesse that motion and go in and start easing stuff. So we're going to start with the position of the ball. We're going to hit that Y position. We're going to keyframe that. And then I'm actually going to go to the end where I want it to be, and I'm going to just copy and paste that real quick. And then in the, so that's 1 second. So at 12 frames right there, is where I'm going to bring the ball down to 800. It's a value. Let me watch that back. I'm going to bring it down slightly more because I want this. In fact, I'm going to start it at a higher value up here. Let's start the ball. Yeah, 350 seems perfect. And then we'll go down, and then we'll just put 350 again as our value back in here. And then I want these balls to be on the same level, so I'm going to hit P for position here, and I'm going to hit 350 there. We're not working with that one quite yet, but I just want to not forget to do it, and this is just how I do my workflow. So I play it back. We got a bounce going. Let's go ahead and let's select all of these. And we're going to go into our graph editor. And remember, if you see it looks like this, like a full-on straight mountain with a point, it is not eased, and this is wrong. So we're going to select all of these keyframes, and we're going to click Easy Ease. And now, ooh, you know what? It looks like this because this first keyframe, this is kind of how you'll know too. This is incorrect. I didn't have this first keyframe down here at the bottom selected. And you can tell because it just goes straight into this curve versus when I had this bottom one selected, it kind of goes up like that. And so I'm going to undo, Control Z. I'm going to make sure I have all of those. So I'm going to shift and hold. Sometimes that's a little hard, right? Sometimes you'll shift or you'll hold and drag and it won't get them all. So if that's the case, like if you only have a few of them selected, you can just hold shift, drag, and it will just add to that selection, right? And so now I'm going to hit Easy Ease, and there we go. We're off to a better start here. Now, if I play it back, it looks okay, but it's not what we did. Remember what we did in the other ones, right? We had it stay on the ground for just a few frames. So it looks like it stops on the ground and then comes back up, right? And so let's go ahead and add that keyframe. Let's add a keyframe into here, into this section up at the top, so that that ball just stays on the ground for just a short amount of time. And so I'm going to select that keyframe. There we go. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that keyframe over here. And then I'm going to go back to that 12 and I am going to copy it and paste it, right? And so there we have like, ooh, no, I'm going to do that. We have just 2 frames where the ball is flat on the ground. So let's play that back. That's not bad. Timing might need a little bit of adjusting, but we can do that here in a second. Let's go ahead and get the curves adjusted correctly so that it accelerates on the way down and decelerates on the way up, right? So remember, we want it to look like a bounce. So I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to do that. I'm going to drag and click this one, and I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to bring this one right there. And then holding down shift, drag. Oh, if you hold down shift too early, like before you start dragging, it's just going to drag it in like this. And we don't want that because we want the curve to come down and then over. So we want to grab it, move it, and hold, grab it, move it. Never mind. I was wrong. Just grab it and move it and pull it down, and it won't go past where the actual keyframe is. And then let me just make sure that they're about at the same area. Let me bring it to that one. Notice how I use the kind of graph on the graph editor, like the background. Hang in there with me, please. I'm a struggle bus today, but it's okay. We all have those days, right? So then I'm going to drag this one in as well. This one, holding down shift and dragging in. Let's make sure they're about equal. Let's take this one and drag it in a little bit more. And then if we select this one as well, we notice they're about at the same spot, right? I have this one touching here and this keyframe over here touching right there. So now let's play this back and see what it looks like. Not bad. That's a little bit kind of dramatic, I guess, a little too dramatic for me of a stop on the ground. If you guys are catching like any kind of glitchy movement, it's just because of the stream and the computer. So I'm going to actually, let's take this keyframe here and I'm going to bring it over one. And so then let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And then I'm going to select them. And I want it to be centered as much as possible. So I'm going to actually go back to my dope sheet, right? And I'm going to grab these two and drag it this way. Because the center frame is at 12. 1, 2, 3. So there's only 3 there. And I'm going to take this keyframe and bring it in. So then, or actually, let's do opposite. I want it to stay on the ground just a hair longer. So I'm going to take that keyframe and move it out. Let's work with that one. I'm not quite sure if I like it as much, but when we add the squash and stretch to it, we'll see kind of what it looks like then. And let me just get this a little bit bigger for you guys. Notice that. I'm going to move, whoop, wrong. I am going to move myself out of the way. There we go. Wanted to select the right one. And then just notify me in the chat, Sarah, if you guys can't see what's going on. You're like my moderator today. I appreciate it. So we have kind of a bounce going, right? And we've got the easing going on. But the reason it looks like weird and choppy here is because it just stops and there's none of that squash and stretch happening. And so we're going to go to the beginning of our timeline. We're going to hit the scale button. And then we're going to kind of go in here. And right before that hits, one frame before, I'm going to take that. I'm going to go ahead and change the value to 70. And then, in fact, I'm going to move it exactly in the same position as when it hits the ground. So it's pop. And then we're going to copy and paste that because we want it to stay the same. We want the value to stay the same while the ball is on the ground. And in fact, I want to just squish it a hair more. So I'm going to do 65. Then go back here and change this keyframe again to 65. So it's the same. You don't want it to continue squashing when it's on the ground, right? So you want to make sure that these two values are the same. And then we're going to move one frame ahead. And we're going to take that 100% keyframe and we'll keyframe that there. And then we're going to move past this keyframe, the third keyframe, and we're going to change that value again to 100. And so what you're going to see is squash, 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 squash. Okay, kind of a dramatic squash going there. Now, I'm going to come into the graph editor and I'm going to hit the scale. We currently aren't, let me check here one second. Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to block out the rest of the squash and stretch here before we get to easing, right? Let's finish blocking it out. So the ball comes down and it hits, but we can exaggerate this further by changing the scale in the Y direction when it's going up and coming down, right? And so the ball, let's start at the beginning. The ball starts to come down. I'd say probably about here. We can put that keyframe value of the 100. In fact, let's move a little bit closer and put that there. And now we want to stretch the ball on the way down before it hits the ground. And so we are going to change the Y value here so that it is nice and skinny. Let's change it to 50. So I'm going to move this one over. This kind of happens a little bit too early, so I'm going to bring this 100, this value 100 keyframe over, squash it, move him back, and then it's going to come up. So this keyframe we should copy and paste it to this where this 100 value keyframe is right there. So we're just going to copy and paste it so it's squashing on the way up. We're going to move over one frame, and then we're going to change that value back to 100 or copy and paste it. So now we have 6 keyframes in the scale. We're going to drop, going down, and it kind of happens too fast. So let's change the easing on these, and then we are going to mess with the timing as well. The one thing I want to do, and you can do this with the scale as well, and I should have probably done it at the beginning, is separate the dimensions. Now, when you haven't done that in the beginning, what you can do, and if you already got your keyframe set, right, you can go into the graph editor and you select all of the keyframes, and then normally down here you can hit separate dimensions, which will do that for you, and for some reason it's grayed out for me, so we might have to just kind of start over again there and just start with separating the dimensions right away. Let's do that initially. So let's change this back to 100. And let's just get the timing down of the ball bounce. Let's get that easing down really nice, because right now I think that's kind of throwing off my, it's just throwing it off visually, and I can't focus on what the scaling looks like when the timing of the bounce is kind of funny. So let's go ahead and adjust these keyframes just a little bit more here so that we can see more of what this should actually look like. And let's add in, let it go back here. Let's add in some more. I don't know, I zoomed in that far. Let's add in some more bounces for real. Like this time, I think that this could use one extra bounce. So I'm going to just drag this back over to the 2. And I'm going to take, I'm going to go back to my dope sheet, because sometimes copying pasting keyframes from the graph editor can get a little confusing. But if I do this, I can go copy and paste right, or mess it up entirely. What I'll do is I'll take this first keyframe and I'm going to copy and paste it there, right? It was already there. And then we're going to go in 10 frames, and I'm going to take these 2, including this last one. So I'm going to take these last 3 and copy and paste them there. So we have 2 full bounces. So let's watch this. 2, 1, 2. Okay. We're going to save that. Now we're going to go back to that graph editor, And we're going to manipulate these curves to look a little bit more dramatic here. In fact, let's grab this one, drag that in slightly. I'm going to take these two, and I am going to, I think the timing does need to be a little bit tighter. I'm just going to take these keyframes and drag one in so that it only sits on the ground for 3 frames, right? Let's play that. Let's make it 2 frames because I still think it kind of looks tricky. And then if we need to update it later, we can. So we're going to play that now. Nice. I think that looks much better. All right. And so with this technique, and similarly to what we did last class, right, you guys can add more bounces and they can gradually get shorter if you want to. If you guys are feeling like you want to challenge yourself and try that, you're more than welcome to. But like I said earlier, if you're going to do something, add something in, just make sure it's done right, or we can, you know, it's just one more thing for me to pick apart. So if you're feeling frisky, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't. I always encourage like risks, right? Taking like a fun risk. I keep clicking off of that. Let me save here. And then let's start with the scale. So let's right click and we want to separate dimensions if possible. Let's see if it'll work. I'm not sure why it won't let me do that. We'll go over 6 frames in and we're going to keyframe that scale. Let's see if it'll let me do it now. We'll look that up. Maybe it is just like clicking the link button. We'll try this again. Sitting on their flap. I don't know why. Let's unlink this then since we're not able to separate the dimensions there. I don't know if it's a setting. Let me check something real quick. Preferences, general. If you guys are ever wondering things, sometimes you can find them in the preferences. You just go up to the top toolbar up here, the top bar, and then you go to edit and then down to preferences, and you can just hit general and bring this entire menu up where you can go through it. Let me see here. Oh, if you guys want to change your layer colors, you can, that is not it, but you can go into labels and you can customize your label colors here. In fact, I think that one's a little too dark. I don't like that. So I'm going to just change that real quick. But this is a way, like if you don't like the default color layer colors, you can come in here and customize them through the preferences. But I don't see that. So maybe create split layers, synchronize, center anchor point, preserve constant vertex, default spatial to linear. Nope. Huh. Okay. So then we'll just work with what we got here. So I'm going to move 6 frames in, and we'll work with the timing in a little bit. And I'm going to keyframe the scale at 100, 100 with the it unlinked, right? So that we have control over both the X and the Y scale of the actual ball. And then here I'm going to come about 1 frame before the ball hits the ground. And that is when I'm going to change the scale of the X position, of the X, or the Y value, I'm sorry. Let's change that to, I think I had 65 before, but I like that 50. And then I'm going to move on the outside of the ball, 1 frame on the outside. I'm going to copy that keyframe and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to move the same 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to move 4 frames after that last keyframe I placed. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to paste that. And then let's just play it back here. For now, I'm just going to hit N on the keyboard, so I'm just playing these ones. I think overall the bounce is too fast. I think that's what's throwing me off. Let's take all of these and stretch it out to the 2 seconds and delete these ones here. So remember I taught you guys how to do that last class. You select all your keyframes and you grab the last keyframe and you hold down Alt and you click and then you drag it, and then it should automatically. All right, here's a little bit easier to see anyways, because now you guys can see the breakdown of it. And it's going to help me see it, and then we can tighten up the timing like I was saying before. So we're going to squash the ball, and then it comes back up, right? It takes too long. Initially, we know that. Let's see here. Where is... Thanks, Sarah. I don't know if you're still in the chat, but I appreciate you hanging in there with me today, because I'm clearly experiencing some technical difficulties inside my brain, and so I'm just working. We're going to get through it. And so we are going to move this. We're actually going to move in from the second scale keyframe. We're going to move back. Let me see, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to move 4 keyframes, and then we're going to change the scale of the, we're going to change this back to 100 right here. And we're going to change the Y value right here. And I'm going to change that to, or the X value, sorry. X value, Y value. My brain is saying different today, but if I change this one, it is the X. Let me see here. If I change this one, it's the X value. If I change this one, it is a Y value. And then I'm going to just write, because it's all symmetrical. If you look at the timeline, I keep switching between there. But if you look at the timeline, it's all symmetrical, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste that keyframe right on the other side. And then we're going to go ahead and play this back. All right. So that looks okay. But this all happens too slow, right? So I'm going to take that, the first and the last keyframes, and I'm going to drag it closer to where our squash starts happening, or a stretch starts happening, right? Let's bring that, let's undo that. That's happening too quickly. So let's drag this keyframe in. I think it's because I don't actually need the 2 keyframes there. I have an extra keyframe in. I couldn't figure out what was going on, and that is, I believe, what it is. So that's exactly what it was. Okay. So for those of you watching at home, which is everyone, right? I had added 2 keyframes where the squash happens and stays. Like it occurs and then it just stays that way. And I'm not quite sure why I did that, but it shouldn't be like that. The squash should just kind of happen right in the middle of when the ball is already here. So I'm just going to delete one of these keyframes right here. And I'm going to take this one and I'm going to drag it to the center. In fact, I'm going to drag it right here, right after the ball hits the ground. And then I'm going to take the first and second keyframe. I'm going to drag that in so the timing's a little bit tighter on there. And then I'm going to do the same on this side, right? In fact, I want the ball to start stretching on its way up before it actually gets off the ground, I believe. Let's watch that replay. Much better. We're getting there. Okay. So I'm going to just change the timing of that slightly, move that over. There we go. Okay. So I understand. I'm sorry. Like I said, I apologize a million times. My brain is kind of all over the place. So let's just run through that real quickly. You have your position keyframe set where the ball is hitting the ground and it's staying on the ground for just a few frames. Right after that ball hits the ground, right here, ball hits the ground here, is where you want to set your keyframe where the Y value squishes down, right? And then these keyframes right here are the stretch that happens. This one right here is a squash. These are the stretch. And these keyframes on the end here, these ones are the original, right? Because we want it to always come back to the original shape, which is, as far as value-wise goes, is 100, 100. So it's going to go 100, 100 here, like a full-size regular value. Let's get these off. And then through this time here, it's starting to stretch out. It's stretching out while it's going down, stretching and squashing at the same time. Here's where it gets the full squash. Then it starts to stretch on its way back up here, right? This is the stretching on its way back up. And this section in between this keyframe and this last keyframe is where it's going back to the original shape, the original values. And so I hope that explanation was a little bit simpler. I know that we're kind of in it right now, but I just want to make sure that you guys aren't getting confused, right? Because that was, I'm fully in understanding that that whole section was a little confusing right there. Yeah. Full disclosure, I have, I live with ADHD, and so some days are a little bit harder than others. I don't have, there's ways that I manage it, but just one of these is just one of those days for me. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there. But yeah, Sarah, I have those days where it takes me a bunch of time to get one thing done because I keep getting distracted by other things. So I'm fully there with you guys if that happens to you. And so now we have our bounce. We have the bounce with the squash and stretch happening. And now it actually looks good, right? Squash or stretching on the way down, squashing when it hits the ground and coming back up. And it stays on the ground for just like a split second to where it's like, okay, it gives it a little bit of that exaggeration that we're looking for. And so now we're going to go in and we are going to finesse these keyframes, right? We got the blocking down. Now it's time to finesse it. And this is the reason why blocking out the animations are important, right? Because if I would have eased these keyframes, I mean, clearly I was struggling there for a second. I wasn't seeing something right. It wasn't looking right. And blocking out the animation allows you to kind of see that general motion is off right away before you start adding that easing into there. Because once you start adding the easing, right, it's another layer of complexity of the motion. And if it's already wrong to begin with, you're going to have a harder time getting the motion right when you're trying to ease it and correcting the curves, right? And so let's just select these again. Now that we have our general motion down, and we're going to go into here. Cool, looks all crazy. We're going to select all of the keyframes and we're going to ease them. And now we're going to work with that. Let's see here. I'm just going to read through. Yeah, ADHD brains unite. I'm just going through some notes. I feel like right now, because I'm getting lost in my thoughts, that it's a good idea that I go through my notes real quick. So okay. So remember, this is our X. The red is our X and the green is our Y. And so we want to start, let's start easing. Let's start with the stretch that's happening, right? Which is the Y value, which is the green. We're going to be looking at the green line here. And so we want, here's where it starts to stretch. We kind of want that to be a little bit more exaggerated, right? We want it to happen a little bit. Let's select this one here and just kind of move that out here this way. So it comes out of this, and let's see what this looks like. So it's going to come into the stretch really quickly. Into that zero, let's see. That's not bad. Let's try the same thing on this side. Let's click and drag this top keyframe, and we're going to drag it out here, holding down Shift. Don't forget to hold down Shift. And then we're going to click and drag, and we're going to bring this one up a little bit. Not 100% over this, not 100% over this way to where it stops, but just kind of allowing a little bit of a curve there. And let's look at that animation right there. Yeah, the squashing is happening fairly quickly on the stretching, I'm sorry, apologize. Stretching is happening pretty quickly on there. So let's go ahead and ease, finish like finessing the X, and then we'll, you know, continue moving things around until we like the way it looks. And so I kind of want, so this is where the ball is squashing and stretching at the same time, right? In between this keyframe and this keyframe, both is happening. You notice like the Y value is changing and the X value is changing as well. And so you have both motion kind of happening here. Let's try and make it so that these look similar. I'm going to drag this one out. And I'm going to take this side and I'm going to drag this one out. Take this one, I'm going to see what it looks like when we make it look like a bounce. I don't think this is going to work, but let's just see what it looks like. Holding down shift, I'm going to drag that. Take this one, I'm going to drag this one. Because this isn't technically, it's not a bounce, so, but I do want to just see where it kind of looks. It's actually not bad like that. Let me see this. The speed graph, you could. It's all happening to like the timing. Oh, let's go back. Let's go back to the value graph. Redo, 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 undo, undo. Oh, got a little lost there. Let me pull that back out. I don't want it so dramatic. In fact, I do kind of want to bring this back up to a flat area here to allow the ball to kind of ease more into that flattening shape. That's really not bad looking right there. I'm going to take these keyframes and I'm going to just shuffle them in a little bit. Take these ones right here and I'm going to shuffle them in a little bit. Tighten that timing up, right? Let's watch that now. Stretching. I want to bring this Y value because I want it to still be I want it to still be stretching right here. Here's a problem that I'm noticing is right in this, on this frame, we go down on that frame, the ball is symmetrical, right? It's not, the values aren't exactly the same, but visually it looks symmetrical and it shouldn't look like that. We want the stretch to be happening pretty much all the way down until we get to that squash right there. So let me take this and I'm going to drag it over. And remember, it's linked, these are linked, this is the same. So I'm going to take this one here and it's going to drag that one as well. And tighten that timing up. And then we can just kind of walk through it frame by frame. Stretching, stretching, coming down. There we go, squashing. Coming back up. In fact, I'm going to take this one and move it back. Stretch, stretch. Hits the ground. Squash. Let's bring this out so it's just kind of looks a little bit more exaggerated right there. Nice squash. Coming back up. There we go. Okay, so then let me take this one and I'm going to drag this one out kind of. I'm going to take this last keyframe and I'm going to drag it over one more. Then I'm going to take this one, this Y value. I'm going to drag it over one. Let's see if I like the timing of that. And there we go. We have a ball that doesn't have, there's not too much, there's not a bunch of pre-squash happening, right? Like it kind of, it doesn't pre-squash at all before it actually hits the ground. You see it stretching, yes, but it's not pre-squashing, right? Because that's one of the problems that you guys kind of saw me go through. And then also one of the problems that you generally see with students' work is that the squashing happens way too early. And we definitely don't want that. The stretching can happen early, but then as soon as it starts to squash, the stretching stops, right? And it goes down into that squash and then starts to go back up into the stretch. And so we don't want to see that ball start to squash like that before it hits the ground. It should only happen when the ball is actually on the ground. And in fact, I think I'm going to drag this middle keyframe over one. And let's see what that looks like. I don't know if I like that or not. I think I like it this way. But it looks, you know, it kind of looks like flubber. The way that, you know, the way that it bounces and the way that it squashes and stretches on the ground very quickly, but enough to show like, boom, it's hitting the ground and that squash and that's like it's building that momentum to shoot back up and, you know, go back up into the air, right? And so that's really what we're looking for here. I am going to also then select all of the keyframes, right? And I am going to make my timeline a little bit shorter, and I'm going to select all of them. And I might just tighten up this animation slightly so it's only 1.5 seconds instead of 2 seconds. Let's just see what that looks like. If it's that looks a lot nicer, right? That's what I'm saying about adjusting the timing after you have all of the stuff done. Now you can, like I said earlier, you can adjust the timing like this, like I just did right now, where you select all the keyframes, make sure all of them are selected, and you can grab these little white bars here and you can drag them out or you can push them in, and that just times, it keeps everything equal distance the way you have laid it out on your timeline as far as keyframes. Or you can grab you select all your keyframes, you grab the last keyframe and you hold down the Alt and you can drag then. And now let's just go in real quick. Let's zoom in all the way that we can. And I see that there's a few of them that aren't quite on exact keyframes. In fact, I don't think any of these ones are. So I'm just going to make sure that these land directly on a keyframe, whether it's one over or one. Just either way, I just want to make sure that it's on a keyframe. So there. Because these, remember, the original size, the stretching happening. These are the position keyframes. Right here are the position ones. Right? But here's where the ball hits. In fact, I liked it over there more. And then starting to stretch back up to the original size. So let's play that again. There we go. And we have a nice squash going on, and that's using the transform properties, right? And so it looks good, but we can add, normally I'd say let's add motion blur, right? I add the motion blur on, I turn the motion blur on overall, right? And then I go to this ball transformation and I turn the motion blur on this way. So it looks even better that way, right? But let's add something a little bit different. You can either do the motion blur like this, or we can add something else, and I spoke a little bit about it a couple classes ago, but we can add a smear effect. Now, what are smears, right? Animation smears were used to emulate motion blur back in the day when they used to animate everything by hand, right? They didn't have a computer to automate that process for them and to just kind of like write in those keyframes where they needed. And so what they would do is they would take the images and they would distort and pull and stretch and squash things so that it looked like a smear. In fact, if I look up animation smears, you will see some of these familiar image or like cartoons that you've seen and how they kind of look broken down. Let me see here. I mean, for instance, this is how essentially how a computer emulates motion blur, right? When it adds it in there, it's adding an image each time. It's just fading it out quicker at the same time. And to do that by hand is just, it's a lot of work. And they do it here. It sells kind of that stretchiness, that elasticity look, and then it also sells speed. For instance, this one right here, by drawing Elmer Fudd's head like 4 times, really they're not drawing it 4 times. They're just drawing one shape, and there's just added lines in there with some scribbles over top, which sells the effect of like a blur, a motion blur, and of speed, right? Same here. Really cool stuff. I suggest you guys look into this more, because you'll find some really weird animation smears from cartoons that you know. And so let's kind of emulate that, right? Like the motion blur, you can see it's kind of doing that right here. You can see that that's drawing different iterations of the ball each time. And then it's also adjusting the opacity each time, right? It's slowly fading out as it goes further and further away from the object, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want it a little bit more stylized, what you can do is add something called an echo effect. And essentially, it does the same thing that you saw when I zoomed in on that motion blur, except you get to control more of whether you want it to be fading at the end, like if you want that transparency to start to happen, or if you want extra iterations of the ball being drawn. And so let's add that effect to the ball, and I'll walk you guys a little bit through it. So you'll select that layer, and up here in your effects panel, just make sure you're going to type in the search, you're going to type in echo, and it will be under time. I believe you guys get trap code particular as well. Make sure you're not using the echo space or any of the trap code effects. You want to use the effect echo that's under the time category. All right, and so I'm just going to click that, and I'm going to drag it onto that layer. And automatically it changes the ball's color. That's okay. We're going to fix that here. So up in the top, echo time. What is that? That is the distance of space that is in between each iteration of the ball. And so it's so low right now because you want that spacing to be really tight. For example, if I put... Here, I'll show you that in a second. Let's get to the rest of these first. Number of echoes is how many times that object actually repeats. The starting intensity is, I believe, how opaque it is right in a way, or how quickly the echoes start to follow. And then your decay is going to be having it, I think what it does is it tapers the object, and it also changes the transparency. And then the echo operator, that is the reason that this ball changed to a yellow color, like a bright yellow color, is because we want to change that to composite in the back. So basically, what that did is it took all those echoes and then it put them on top of the ball, and it put it into an add blend mode. And we don't want that. We just want them all the same color. And then we want to put them behind the ball. So that's where the echoes start, right? So you got to think about them being layered and stacked, almost like a slinky, like when you move one side and the others follow, right? So we're looking at the top of it. And then let's crank this up. We want quite a few, so let's put in there like 20. Let's start with 20. This is computationally heavy on a computer. So the more that you, same with motion blur, right? Just any kind of blur is computationally heavy for your equipment. And so just be mindful of that when you go to render things, right? Especially if you're already starting off with like a slower computer. And so I'm going to just kind of go in here, and you can already see that we have the echoes happening, right? And they are very, very tight together. In fact, so tight together that you can't even see the separation that's occurring right here with it, because there's 20 different images of the ball being drawn at the same time. Now, we don't want the decay. We want to take the decay and put it to 0, right? Because we don't want the decay is this, okay, that is what it is. The decay is the size, right? You don't want the size getting smaller. You don't want it to scale down as these echoes go further and further. And the intensity is your opacity, right? So as far as the echo effect goes, let me do this. In echo effect, this will be a good one to write down. Intensity equals opacity, and then decay equals scale. And you want both of those for this instance to be 0, right? It's good to know how it works for future times you use it, but for right now, we want both of those, or we want the intensity to be 1 and then the decay to be 0. And let's change this to negative 0.01 so it tightens up that timing a little bit more. Negative 0.001. What? Yeah, let's try that. That didn't look, that just makes it look like nothing happened. Let's keep that 3 on. We might have to increase that. Let's turn that back on and see what happens. It's because this is taking so much time. Let me see. Negative 0.003, I think it was on. There we go. We got that nice squishy effect happening kind of right there. And that is really what sells that flubbery effect. So I kept the echo time. And if you guys are having trouble up here, you can just hit reset, right? And it'll reset it. So again, you can keep the echo time the same. Let's increase the numbers here to like 20. You probably get away with 15, maybe 15 to 20. And then from add to composite and back. And just leave the starting intensity and the decay alone for now. Let me see. Composite and back. Let's try 15. Let's do a little bit less and see how that looks. Oh, I'm sorry. The decay has to go down to like 0, I think, right? Let's add the 20 in. The decay has to be a very low number. That's going to be the negative. I think that one's going to be negative 0.01. Notice how it's like drawing them and it's changing the opacity, right? So where did I have that at? If you grab the, here, let me show you guys. If you grab the number there, great, it won't show it. But there's, what happens is there's a little hand that shows up with the arrows pointing both ways. And that means you can just click and drag the value back and forth and decide kind of where you want that to be. In fact, I'm going to go 0.25 on that. Tighten up that. Let's put this back at 1. Sometimes you just got to play around with stuff. We'll put that at 20, right? Because that seemed to work. And then 0.033? 0.003? I forget what it was. It was a negative. Maybe that's why. There we go. Make sure it's a negative number upside in the echo time. There you go. Let's change this to 15 and see how that looks. I think I like that a little bit more. And then you can almost see them like that, but you can see like the iterations happening, but it happens so quickly that you can't actually point it out. But it adds like this squashiness to it, right? This elasticity that you're looking for. And so just make sure, again, the reason that was acting a little funny for me is because my time was in a positive. And we want those to be in a negative. So make sure that it is a negative value when you put that in. And that your starting intensity and your decay is 1. So just leave those as is. But there we go. We have the first squash. And let's get to the second ball. And the second one is going to be your path animation, right? And so we're essentially going to copy the bounce that happens, right? So we're going to go over here to this layer and we're going to hit the P position. And we're just going to select this Y position. Here's something that's really nice for you guys to know. In order to save time, you can copy position. You can copy any of your transform values to other objects, right? Which is awesome. But you just have to be careful how you do it. So I want to just transfer the bounce up and down that's happening right now to this path animation ball, right? Because that's the only part. We're not going to do the scale because we're going to we're going to deform the ball a little differently here. But the Y position changes should be the same. So I click on I click on this part right here. And then you're just going to hit Control C. And then you want to open the position value on the object that you want to copy it to. You're going to separate that dimension, right? Because we only want to do the Y value. I'm going to select that. Make sure that the indicator is at the beginning of the timeline. And then you're just going to hit Control V. And then it automatically pastes those to the same. So it's going to bounce at the same time, which is really nice. Okay, so we have our bounce in there, but we want to get that stretch going in. And this stretch is going to be essentially manually doing what we were emulating, what we were doing here. And I don't want to look at this ball while I do this, so I'm going to just solo this ball layer, the path animation ball layer, because that's the only one I want to look at right now. And so in order to animate the path of something, you have to go into the layer. I'm going to go ahead and shut my camera off for you guys to see this a little bit more. Let's see here. There we go. You're going to unfurl the menu, and then down under in contents, it will say ellipse. Now we want to essentially convert this into it is a shape right now, but we want to be able to have full control over the shape, right? And so we're going to go in to that ellipse and we're going to toggle down and we're going to see it'll say ellipse path. We're going to toggle that one down as well. Click on it and toggle it down. And you're going to see it's going to say size and position. You don't have to worry about that. You want to right click on the ellipse path and convert to a Bezier path. And now what that does is it adds, it takes those two, like you noticed how it said scale and let me see what it said before. Oh, right there. It said the size and position. It's essentially going to take those things and it's going to combine them into one to just a path around it. And so we'll convert that to the Bezier. And we're going to select that path, and you're automatically going to notice that it gives you these little points with the handles, which now you can grab and manipulate. Before, you're not able to do that because it's almost like a joined vector, and we are just essentially ungrouping that vector so that we have control over all of the little points. And the best part about it is that you can animate the path, right? But the big thing here is that you don't want to... you want to be very careful about making sure that you are paying attention to when you want to change the path, that you make sure you move your playhead down the timeline, right? Because these essentially, even though they're separate, right, when you animate them, they are joined together. And what do I mean by that? So if I hit the key here, if I keyframe it, and I grab this path, and I move forward, and I move this up, and then I'm like, okay, now I want to move this to the side. I move this to the side, but oh, I forgot to move my playhead. See how it still treats it all as one. So you just want to make sure it treats like all of those individual positions that are around the circle, all those little vertexes, it treats them all as one. So just pay attention to make sure that you've moved your playhead before you start to change the path, right? Because it's recording that movement. So we want to start stretching the ball probably right around here. So let's zoom in on our timeline so we can get a better idea of like where... It's okay to zoom in this high too, right? Let's say I wanted to start stretching down right about there. And so I'm going to move one keyframe ahead, and I am going to animate the path, toggle on that, and I'm going to move 2 keyframes in, and I am going to start to elongate this ball a little bit. Take that and drag that down. Bring this up. Holding down shift, I can do that. I'm going to bring... Whoop. I'm still on here. You can, if you select the keyframe as well, you'll notice that it's got these selected. And you just, whenever you want to select a vertex, I recommend do not click on it. You click and drag over it, right? And we're going to start to kind of thin out a little bit here. I'm going to hold down shift. The big thing about this is when you start to do this, you want to make sure that the ball contains the same volume. And I mean by that is that when it's starting to like stretch and squash, you want it to look like it's the same size no matter what. Like it's got the same amount of volume in the ball as it's moving, right? As it's sloshing around, because you don't want to make it all of a sudden really skinny to people are like, well, where'd the rest of the ball go, right? And I'm going to keep it going down here. I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit more to exaggerate it. I'm going to bring this one in down this way, holding down shift. I'm going to select these 2 and bring them down. You can grab multiple at once, right? Because the weight is starting to shift. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and so you can break these curves, right? If you hold Alt, you can break that path, that Bezier handle, and you're able to just start manipulating kind of like what the shape looks like. So let's make it more of like an hourglass shape, right? Let's bring it in here. That's okay. We're going to take this and we're going to kind of pull it out. You don't want to hold down shift. We're going to pull it out on this side. We're going to do the same over here. What did I do there? We're going to do the same over here. It's looking slightly too big, right? So I'm just going to change the height. I'm going to bring this up. Actually, keep this one down. And I'm going to take this one, bring it down in more. And I want to start doing that like inward transform, like the real stretching, like thinning out of the center of the ball right here. And so I'm just going to bring this in, kind of like a, he looks like, this reminds me of Plankton on SpongeBob. Don't know why I'm thinking about that, but it does. It's probably the color of him. And then I'm going to just kind of start to bring this one out a little bit. This one out. In fact, I'm going to make these kind of go in a little bit. And a little bit. Going down. Starting to, it hits the ground right there. So let's, I'm going to move in one frame. And that is where I'm going to, right there is where I'm going to update the keyframe. So if you don't see anything on here, right, you just go over to the layer and you click on the path again and you'll see the vertexes again. And then we're going to, this is where we're going to get the full squish. So I'm going to bring this one out here. Bring this one out here. Bring this one down. We're getting real squared off there, so I'm going to take these and bring them in. And it's just a lot of tedious manipulation of the shape, right? Until we get kind of something that we're looking for. I almost want to bring this down a little bit. The ball looks a little bit too big at the moment, right? Because it's like looking like this is the original shape. No, it's about holding the same volume. Gets a little bit too square here on the bottom for me, so I am going to just take these and slightly bring them in. Just ever so slightly. Squishing down. I want this to kind of go down a little bit further. I'm going to bring these out to kind of bring these in actually to smooth that line out. Drop these down a little bit because, right, the gravity of the ball, and when it smashes down, right, the force of it hitting the ground is going to just kind of smush it into this flattened shape. I want to flatten this a little bit more. And drag that out a little bit so it's a little flatter on the bottom there. In fact, let's grab this one. Drag that a little bit below. I'm going to take this and move it back down. And then here, I'm going to really accentuate this. Bring it down. Maybe bring these up and let's see how that looks before we decide on it. Full on squish, right? Squish. In fact, I am going to just replace this one right here. I'm going to take this keyframe, I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to replace it with this one because I like this shape a little bit more here. It's fully squished, and by the next frame, by right here, it should be going up. And so let's start to get it kind of more back to the shape that we want to, whoop, let's do this. We're going to get it back into that stretch. And remember, if you need to break the keyframes, or if you need to break the Bezier handles, you just hold Alt. You click and hold Alt, and then you can move this around separately, right? By here, this is going to be down this way. This is going to be up this way. These are going to be heading in, heading in. But it's going to be kind of opposite here, right? You want this part to be skinnier because it's leaping off of the ground. At the bottom, you want it more tapered at the bottom here. Now that's heading back up. And here, it's going to still be a little bit like flared out at the top. And I think that this is just a little bit too small. We want to add some more volume. Remember, we want to make sure we keep the volume, so I'm just going to drag this down a little bit. And then I'm going to go up probably another frame there, a couple frames. I'm going to start to expand this back out, making sure that I start to get in more of that circular shape. So I'm going to drag this more in because we're back at like that ball shape. Let me see how many we have here. Okay, past one. I want to make sure that it's equal. Let me see here. That this, like, right, because the squashing starts right here, one frame before the ball. We're doing a little pre-squash. Hits the ground, comes back up. In fact, I might just copy and paste, delete that, and copy and paste this frame and these last two frames. Save myself some time, right? Why not? Control C, Control V. And then if I play it back, all right, hold on one second here. Something you guys will notice is it stops. Why does that happen? It is because the keyframes are in the wrong order, right? We want this keyframe to be over at the 1 second mark, and this keyframe needs to be before. One way you could do it, you can manually switch them around, or you can, when you copy and paste it, you right click on it and make sure that you actually on both of the keyframes you need to swap, right? And you right click and you go to Keyframe Assistant, and then at the bottom here it says Time Reverse Keyframes right there, and that just says it's reversing the way the keyframes work, the times of the keyframes or the values of the keyframes. It's just going to flip-flop it essentially. And so I will right click and do that. Time reverse keyframes, and then we are to our normal. This is how it should look. So if I play it, you get a nice squash there. In fact, what I would do if I were you guys is start doing this a lot sooner, right? Let's drag that out. So that's 2 away. Let's make this one 3 away. And then this here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's 4 away. Let me count. The first one is 1, 2, 3, 4 keyframes away before we start making changes. 2. I just turned on something on my other screen. I'm sorry, you guys. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to move that, the third one, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away. Let's try that. Just kind of messing with the timing a little bit, right? There we go. Not bad. Notice like it starts to kind of look like, at a certain point, like it starts to deform and kind of look like almost like a bowling pin upside down, right? That's a great shape to go for, is like a bowling pin shape. In fact, you can make this shape more of like a bowling pin look. So where you bring this in a little bit more there, and then we're gonna tighten this in a little bit, but still leave it out. So it's a little bit flared at the end. And then that change, I'm going to copy that keyframe and put it back here, right? And then just kind of flip it. Oh, no, that actually looks really nice. No, I think I will flip it. Upside down, right? Opposite. So I'm just going to drag this one down. Whoop, not like that. Select these vertexes, drag them down holding shift. About the same place. Select the top one. Drag that one slightly in. So it's still a little flared at the end, right? And then take this one and drag these handles out a little bit more. If it looks a little too, just drag that back around this way. Take this one, just slightly drag it out again. Nice. Now, just remember, like one of the things I want you guys to remember is that when you're making changes to the path, make sure that you're, let's say you wanted to, like right now I made changes to that path shape. You want to be on that keyframe. So it's very important to be zoomed into your timeline as far as you can be, because you want to be on top of that keyframe if you're going to make changes. If you are not, if you start over here and you start making changes, you will add another keyframe. And so you don't want to do that. So just be mindful of that when you start working here, right? Because this one can be a little bit funny. But let us go ahead and ease these. So I'm going to go into the editor here, and I'm going to select my keyframes. And we're actually going to do this inside of the speed graph, right? Because, let me see here. Let's ease them. Let's see what that looks like. I actually don't think this is right. No, let's not do that. So inside the speed graph, right, we're right now, let's select all these keyframes. And then hit Easy Ease. And then, no, I guess we shouldn't, let's not do that. You just don't hit Easy Ease. So just take these, and then you can just adjust kind of the handles on here. And that will adjust the speed of which the, if I can grab them all, okay. That will adjust the speed in which the changes start to take place, right? So if we put this here, and I take this and I start, sorry, if I select only the one, and I start dragging it out a little bit more, it changes the influence and the speed at which that path starts to change and take shape, right? And so you can kind of adjust like the easing here in that manner. There we go. And that just kind of changes how quickly that it morphs. Essentially, it's morphing, right? And morphs from one shape to the other. from one path change to the next path change. And it also helps to kind of smooth out those areas where you might feel like you're seeing a little bit of a change. Or you're seeing like you're not selling the illusion of it morphing into it. So let me see here. That's good. Nice. All right, and then you want to save your work, right? All right. So now let's add the echo effect to make it, to give that, we can just essentially, all you have to do is select that one layer, and you go up to your effects and controls and you select that effect directly. You want to grab it right here. You don't want to grab any of these, right? You just want to grab the actual effect layer. And then you're just going to hit Control C, and you're going to go over, you're going to select your path animation ball, and you're going to hit Control V, and it automatically puts that echo on there. And now we want to see the rest of the shapes, right? So we're going to just unsolo this layer right there. So I'm going to click that, and they all of a sudden show up, and let's check it out. Nice. There we go. And notice how these have been like eased and stuff. All of your keyframes look like they've been eased now. And so that is how you add squash and stretch via path animations and via transform. And so make sure that when you are putting this into your one video, that I want to see a few bounces, right? At least 3 bounces. So let me just write that on the screen so you guys see. I want to see 3 to 4 bounces of the balls, right? There's the weight balls and the squash and stretch one, and I want to see the at least a few bounces for each one. All right, and now we're going to move to impact. So with impact, first of all, I just want to let you guys know, I don't know if we're going to get to the questions today, so we might have to get to those either later. Yeah, I'm going to get to those probably next class, and or get to them personally and like just answer. I actually want those to be, we'll talk about those. What I will do is I'll go through your real and surreal projects, and I will grade those without going over them in class. But or we can do it later when we're trying to save a little bit more time. But right now, I really want to get through this section so that you guys can get this project done and we can just kind of move forward. So I've got the type here. I'm just going to lock it in. And then I am going to, the first ball that we're going to create, right? We want to have a projectile hitting another ball. And we want to illustrate the weight of that one ball, right? Of the main big one. We want to illustrate weight either way, and then speed. When something impacts another thing. When you have something that is light impacting something that's heavy, and then something that is heavier impacting something that is light. And so we're going to do the first one with creating 2 balls. So we're going to go up here and select our shape tool. And I am going to turn the stroke off. Here's a quick tip here. If you hold down Alt and you click on the stroke, either the little box or the word stroke there, it will either bring this up and you can click that, or you can, if you click on the actual picture, you can just cycle through if you hold down Alt, right? And so some of them are gradients. We don't want that. I have the fill color right here. Perfect. And so we're going to create, holding down Shift. This is going to be our heavy ball. So let's type that. Let's change the layer name. Heavy ball. and I'm going to hit V and then make sure like it's centered right there. So make sure that your the anchor point is centered in the middle of the ball. And then I am going to create another shape. Make sure you click off the layer and then you come up here. And I'm going to make this one smaller holding down shift. And this one I'm going to change the color to, I switched my screens around, so that's why it keeps popping off screen. These little, like the pop-ups for the colors and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to change this one to, let's change it to like a purple. And this one, in fact, this is too light. It's too dark of a purple, but let me rename this first. Projectile. Let's just color this orange. That one's a good color. There we go. All right. So I'm going to get my selection tool. Same here. I want this to be centered, anchor point centered. Let's make sure that they're about the same height. In fact, great way to tell that. Oh, not that one. Let me zoom in first on the. Let's zoom in here. If you want to create like your own quick grid or you're trying to line things up, if you hit Control R, it will bring up the ruler and you just come up to the top here, right here, and then you click and you drag down and it will create a ruler. Now there's also, if you notice, it comes on the side too, so you can have a vertical ruler or a horizontal ruler. And so I'm going to bring down just a quick ruler so I can make sure they're at the same, they're resting on the same spot, right? And so then I'm going to grab that projectile ball, I'm going to hit P for position. Hit P for position there, and then I'm going to just drag this down until the ball is touching the line that I created. And then I can grab this line and just drag it up and it disappears. Click and drag and it's gone. So, but the rulers really will help out. And so let's go ahead and block out this animation here. So we are going to move the playhead in about a half a second. And then we're going to keyframe the transform. We're going to keyframe the transform property of the projectile right now. We're going to worry about that first. And so we're going to separate the dimensions. And instead of the Y value, because we're not doing a bounce, right? We are going to only be keyframing the X position. So I'm going to keyframe that and then hit U to just show the keyframes, the current keyframes, and the current properties that are animated. And then I'm going to move the playhead. Let's move it to 2 seconds here. We'll probably change the timing, but let's just move it here. And then I'm going to take this ball and I'm going to hold down shift and I'm going to drag it until it touches the large ball, right? You want it to be right on the edge there. And so then if I just play that back, boop, and there it stops, right? Let's just hit N on there. And we'll just kind of zoom in on the timelines so that we're not looking at too much of the extra timeline. All right, and so we have the blocking of that. And then what happens when we would hit a ball, right? If we're going to hit something that's heavy, we're going to ricochet off of that ball, right? So I'm going to move about 6 frames ahead. So we're here, let's see, 2, 4, 6. And then I'm going to move this ball backwards. And so all I got to do is grab that value and just kind of move it back here. So if I play that back, it's going to hit it and then bounce back. Hit it and then bounce back. All right, so we've got kind of, it started out here, but let's ease the keyframes because we need to add acceleration and deceleration, right? So I'm just going to grab all of these and then because I'm on a PC, I'm going to hit F9, which is automatically going to ease them. But you guys go ahead in here and just select them. And we're going to make sure that we're working in the value graph this time, not the speed graph. And here you can see the ball speeding up, slowing down, hitting, and then kind of slowly backing down. We don't want that. We want the ball to like speed up, slam that, and then go backwards in like a smoother fashion. We want it to, so we're gonna take this here and 1 second. All right, we want the ball to kind of start slower and speed up and then hit it. So we are going to actually reverse this to kind of look like this, right? Because here it's going to start slow and then we want it to hit this fast. So actually, let's go like this. Because we want it, we're creating a bounce right here, right? It's bouncing off. So I am actually going to go back here. Don't overshoot. We don't want the overshoot. So holding down shift. And then it's going to slowly speed up and then it's going to hit that ball. And then we want it to bounce off. So we're going to drag this down, right? And then kind of just go into its resting position here. Which I'm going to just kind of bring in because I want it to slowly roll into its resting position. Nice. All right. Okay, so we have that section blocked out, right? Not bad. It's a little slow, but we'll work on that. And so I'm going to go back over here to our dope sheet, and then I'm going to animate the heavy ball. So I'm going to click on that layer, and I'm going to separate the dimensions of the position. I'm just going to animate the X position. And but I don't want this to start animating until the ball is hit by the projectile. And so I'm going to take this keyframe that was at the beginning of the timeline and I'm going to drag it over here. In fact, I'm going to move it 1 frame ahead. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and just kind of move it a little bit, right? Because it's a heavy ball. We don't want it to move. We don't want it to move very far, and we don't want it to move very far very fast, right? Because if it's heavy and it's getting hit by a lighter projectile, it's going to go just roll nice and slow into its position. And so let's see what that looks like. All right, not bad, not bad. Let's drag that keyframe out a little bit more to make it slower. There we go. And now we got to ease these keyframes. Oh, wow. I don't know if you guys heard that. My stomach is growling. I'm going to go into the graph editor here, and I'm going to select these keyframes. I'm going to hit Easy Ease. And then we are going to, we want the ball, what was I going to say? Let me think here. Oh, we want to separate it. We want to just work with the X value, adjusting the speed of it so it accelerates and hits it. Speed up the ball. Let's see here. This one's going to work. This one I kind of want, let's see what it looks like this way. Now I want it to really slowly move into this position. So let's kind of get the curve looking like this. Real slow, right? It's covering a lot of ground. Let's see it. Nope, opposite of that. So, holding down shift, we're going to drag this like that. And then we're going to take this bottom, the first keyframe. I'm going to drag it up. Actually, kind of like that, right? I don't want it to go really fast at all. There we go. Not bad. In fact, I'm going to take this and I want it even less dramatic. I'm going to hold down shift and I'm going to make it pull it in this way. So it takes a while to get there. I think I liked it the way. You want to drag it down like that. There we go. That looks a little bit better. It kind of happens fast, right? So I'm going to take that keyframe and I'm going to drag it out this way a little bit more. Then I'm going to adjust that curve. So it's just a nice, smooth, easy curve. There we go. That looks a lot better, right? The timing of everything is still a little slow. So let's select the position of the projectile and then holding down shift select the position of the ball, and we're going to select all of these keyframes, click and drag, and then I'm just going to shorten this by holding shift. Let's see how it works this way. I'm going to bring it to that 2-second mark. Not bad. I kind of want to speed this section up here, so let me actually, we want them both to be right because we want the ball to be hit at the same time. So we want to make sure that we're moving both the keyframes at the same time. I don't know how well this is going to work. Let me see. All right, holding down shift, click and drag. That's kind of risky, right? You guys can do it. And then let's change the speed here by getting a nice, let's add a little overshoot, right? Let's have the ball kind of shoot a little bit back before it takes off. Let's see that. All right, not bad. And then we're just going to drag this up so it's a nice, really quick. The only thing we don't want is we don't want overshoot to happen here, because there's a little bit of overshoot happening by this keyframe, and we don't want that, right? Because that's the ricochet. We just want it to move back. And so you'll want to hold down. There we go. Not bad. In fact, let's drag this one out so it's a lot slower. Holding down shift. It overshoots a little bit here. You can see that it goes a little bit, how do I do that? Let's see, it goes like a little bit below where the keyframe is there. So let's just take this one and drag that up there so it doesn't quite do that. And then I'm just going to hold down Alt. Oh, wrong one. Control, maybe? Is it Control? Yeah, it's Control. There, let's see that. I actually liked it the way it was slightly before. Oh, and I forgot this one. Holding Control, I'm going to just take this one and drag it up. And I'm going to bring this one. And nope, I'm going to take, I want to increase the, that angle there so the speed happens a lot quicker. Okay, that's not bad. And then what I want to do is I'm going to add, you can either add that motion blur, right? You can, let's go back to the dope sheet. You can click that and add motion blur to both of them, which is going to add additional speed. Or we can add the echo effect. So let's go to our previous squash and stretch and we'll grab that effect. We're going to hit Control C. We're going to go to the impact composition, and we're going to make sure we have it on the projectile layer. We don't need an echo on the ball, the heavy ball, because it's moving slow anyways. And so we don't want to make that appear like it's moving any faster, right? So we're just going to copy and paste that echo effect onto the projectile, and then we're going to hit play. Boom. Now, the one thing you can see is the separation that happens there. And so let us, I think it's the timing. Let's put in this one, negative 0.001, and see if that one works a lot better. Yes. And then let us make let me see here. What did I have in my notes? I think I only did like 10. Let me see here. Let's change that. Shorten it up a little bit. Let's make it 5. And then if I play it back, no, let's make it 10. I want to see a little bit more of a dramatic effect on there. Let's do, in fact, even the 15 was okay. 12 to 15 I think would be fine, because it gives it a nice little stretch in there, and then it hits it and slows down. Not bad. Okay, so then let's take this, let's just kind of refine the graph on this large ball real quick. I want to look at that separately. And I'm going to kind of increase this a little bit more, so it looks more like it. There we go. That looks a lot better. Making that more of like a dramatic upwards curve is going to make that heavy ball move fast right away and then slow down dramatically. And in fact, if you wanted to make it even look heavier, you're going to just take that curve and drag it over more at the top. I like the way it looked the other way, but both ways are okay. And then, yeah, so then we have the impact. We're showing how something light impacts something heavy, right, in motion. And so there is one thing I think that is off, and that is there has to be, I think when I took this one, it moved slightly. Nope, that's not it. Oh, never mind. I thought it moved down a little bit. The angle on this kind of looks like it's pointing down, but it's not. It's just my eyes tricking me. So, but yeah, that's what that looks like. And so now let's move on to the next part of this and show what it's like hitting a light projectile, right? we're gonna do it in the example of taking like a croquet mallet. I don't know if you guys have ever played croquet, or like like a golf ball almost, taking some kind of object and hitting a light object with it. So for instance, like the croquet mallet hitting a croquet ball, or let's say a golf club swinging and hitting a golf ball, right? We want the object to be light. And so I'm going to take these and I'm going to turn off their layer, right? Don't forget to turn those back on once you want to look at everything. And I'm going to create a hammer real quick, or the mallet, right? And so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm just going to select I'll select kind of like an off. No, let's pick an off-white color. So it's not quite white, but. And I'm going to draw the stick part, which is going to be like a thin handle, right? And then the base. Now, instead of clicking off of this layer, I want the stick of the croquet mallet and the head of the croquet mallet to be connected. And so when you're drawing shapes inside of After Effects, if you click off the layer and draw, it will create a new layer, right? But we don't want that. So we're going to let me undo that. We're making sure that we're still selected on that layer, and then we're going to draw this other shape here. And notice that it's all on one layer. So if I select this layer and hit V to move it around, it's all one shape. And that way, it's just a quick drawing tip for you guys inside of After Effects. It's a little bit weird sometimes, and you'll accidentally do that when you don't want to, or you'll do it the other way when you do want to draw them on the same layer. But that is just kind of a little tip for you guys on how to illustrate a little bit further into After Effects. And then I'm going to rename the shape layer. So I'm going to name it just mallet or hammer. Hammer's a good one. Let's name it hammer. And I want to go into this though, and I want to make the edges kind of rounded. So I'm going to go into path and roundness. I'm going to crank up the roundness here. Probably to like 15. Let's look at it that way. And this is let's do it 20. I like even numbers, right? Okay, that looks good. And then that way inside of here, you notice that it says inside of your contents of your layer, it says rectangle 1 and rectangle 2. Now, just like layers in your timeline, right? The layer matter order. So if I were to change the color of this one, it will show that it sits on top, or yes, it sits on top of the stick of the mallet, right? So just so you guys are aware of how that kind of works. And then if I were to click and drag that below, then the stick would sit on top of like the mallet head or the hammer head. And so you can actually rename these, right? So I could do hammer head, and then this one like hammer stick. Just so you guys, you know, this can get really complicated when you have complex objects inside of your project, and so it's good to just stay organized like that. And then we're gonna write with a mallet or a hammer. You don't want to animate the position. You're going to be animating the rotation, right? And so we want to animate it like this. But there's only one thing. When you swing a mallet or a hammer, when you're playing croquet, for instance, you want to swing it from up above, right? So we have to make sure that we change our anchor point and shift drag it to the top of the hammer. So that way when we rotate, we can rotate it from the appropriate spot. And so I'm going to save that. I'm going to bring this hammer. I don't want it, when it rotates back, I don't want it to go off screen. And so I'm just going to change the position of it. So just make sure you're in the position tool, V. Then I'm going to move that there. Let's swing it back a little bit and see how that looks. Because I'm going to probably want it to start swinging there. Cool. Bring this back down to 0. That I'm just changing the rotation so that I can kind of see where I want it placed. And then we're going to create another ball. Ellipse. And in fact, let me put on I'm going to get the same color. Here. And I'm going to draw a small ball. And this one can be, it's centered, the anchor point can be centered on this, but let's rename it, rename our layer. Light ball, right? And then make sure they're pretty much lined up. They don't have to be sitting on the same line for this one. I'm not worried about that because it is going to hit it and send it flying off screen. I am a little bit weird and I like to have it pretty even Okay, that looks good. And so we want to, let's go ahead and make this hammer swing back. In fact, let me real quick round the edges of the hammer real quick on the actual handle. This is why naming it is good, because I could automatically see. If you go into the path of the object, you can see the roundness is right there. And you don't have to convert it to a shape thing. You don't have to worry about that. And I'll just crank that up because it'll make it fully round, which looks nice. Save that. And then we are going to hit R for rotation. And we are going to bring that in probably like, let's bring it in about the same time that this projectile starts to move, right? So about 12 frames in. No, let's bring it about 8 frames because it's going to swing back. We're going to keyframe the rotation. Remember, we don't have to, so we're not going to separate the parameters on a rotation because you cannot, because it's a two-dimensional, it's in two-dimensional space and not three-dimensional space. So it only rotates in one direction, and it can't rotate on a z-axis, right? And so we're going to move, let's move here. Let's get a little bit of, let's move to the 6th frame, and that's where we will put that keyframe. And we're going to move that to the 4th one, sorry, because I want a little bit of a wind up. Then I'm going to move this back, and then I want to swing it. Now, here's the thing, right? When you hit something that is light or doesn't weigh a lot, you are going to follow through on that swing, right? And so it's not just going to hit this and stop. It is going to swing through. And so we want to swing it through the ball. We will worry about like actually animating the ball here. I will close that real quick or just hide it. And so we have, it's going back, it's swinging. In fact, I'm going to move that a little bit. You don't have to start it. You don't have to start it on a swing like that. You can just start it like start the rotation of the hammer back. Like it doesn't have to start at a direct, like a straight up and down position. You can if you want to, but for time's sake, I am just going to leave that keyframe out of there. And then we're going to swing the ball. And then when something is hit, right? Like if it's like it's going to swing like a pendulum, right? It's almost like we're holding it back and then letting it go. So it is going to then swing back a little bit and then swing forward a little bit and swing back and forth until it slowly settles down, right? And so we are going to, we're going to emulate that. We're going to emulate that kind of like pendulum swing that happens, right? And so I'm going to move, this kind of happens quick, and then I'm going to move a few frames forward, and I'm going to bring it back, but not all the way, not to the original value, right? Because it's going to lose that momentum. So I'm going to swing, drop it back, move forward, swing it forward, but not all the way. Move forward, swing it backwards, move forward, swing it forward. And then you're just slowly losing momentum as you go. Notice I'm moving, when I move my playhead, I'm moving it about the same amount of frames that I would, because I want the timing to be spaced almost equally there, and then I will update the timing afterwards. And then we'll get it back to a settled position. In fact, let me go to like, just slight, like, probably -4, and then back to A. So if I were to play this, nice. In fact, that's kind of a lot. You guys could even shorten it and not have to do this many like swings back down. And I'm going to take this one, I'm going to drag it out there so it's a little bit longer. Then that's going to settle in quicker. swinging down, hitting it. Okay. And so, you know, the key to that is move the playhead, rotate the hammer. Move it, rotate it, move it, rotate it, back and forth and back and forth. All right, and so let's go ahead and ease this real quick. So I'm going to select all of them, and I am going to go into the graph editor, and notice how it looks kind of like almost like a pendulum swing already, right? Higher, smaller, higher, smaller. I'm going to ease these, and then we're going to mess around with the easing on this so that it's a little bit smoother, right? And we want it to be about equal distance between all of these swings here. Remember, if you wanted to move faster, you shorten the distance in between. And if you wanted to move slower, you extend the distance in between. But I want this to look kind of like an upside down. Let me see here. Let me move these around. Fast. It's going to swing and hit it, and then so, oh, this is a great thing to notice. When if I turn this image of the ball on, in the way that I hit, I change the easing of this curve right here. It would make it look like it were to hit the ball real quick and bounce back off, right? So that's like something to look at, like kind of like right here, right? This almost looks like a bounce. That's incorrect. We don't want it to be like that. Let me think about it for a second. Let me think of this. Okay, so let's make this a nice smooth looking, kind of a nice smooth looking curve to this. Let me move this over a little bit and kind of extend it out so it's nice and smooth into each other. Smoothing this out, smoothing this one out. Moving the timing over, smoothing it out. Making sure about they're not right. Remember, up and down means that it's changing value, right? So I don't want this to be higher than this one right here. I want to make sure it's lower. I'm going to smooth that out a little bit. Smooth this out right here. And I want it to look like a nice smooth sine wave, right? Like a sinus rhythm, like a nice smooth one though. In fact, I want to bring that so close that it's almost, drag that out. Now let's watch it. That looks like a nice smooth settling down into the correct position, right? That's a really nice smooth motion for the hammer to hit the ball. In fact, let me take this and smooth this out a little bit. There we go. That looks really nice. And so now the only thing we have to animate is the hammer, or the ball getting hit by the hammer, right? And so the impact happens almost in between these. So I'm going to I'm going to change, I just changed the timing. I'm going to actually keep the timing where it was, and I'm going to move my playhead to about there. And that's, I'm going to move the ball to that spot, right? Because that's kind of where I want it to hit the ball, right about there. And notice I'm not on the exact keyframe, right? But I'm just right before. In fact, I want to, let's move the ball so it's just touching right up on it. And you can arrow over using your arrows up or down will change where your object is as well. It changes the position. So, and then I just want to drag that ball underneath the hammer so that the hammer's on top when it swings through, right? And then we want this ball to move really fast, right? It's a light ball. So we want it to just kind of fly off screen really quickly. So we're going to actually animate the position, and we're only going to animate the X position. So let's separate the dimensions there, and we're going to keyframe. And then we want it to be off screen, like by within, if I put it here and then move to the 12th frame, I want it off screen by then. Like I want it gone, right? So I want this ball to move fast. So if I do that, the ball is gone. In fact, I want it moving faster. So I'm going to bring that and I'm going to drag that in there. All right, and now the only thing we have to do is ease this so it adds a little bit more speed, right? We want it to go fast right away. And then it's going to slow down. So we want the curve to look like this. And I'm going to shorten this up here so that it doesn't really slow down very much. It's going to slow down really fast, but that's going to be off screen. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that nice and high. So we got a really drastic looking curve here to work with. You hit it and that ball is gone. It's gone a little too fast off screen, so then I'm going to take that keyframe and I'm just going to move it back here, especially because we got the easing. Boom. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Looks like a really light ball. In fact, you can see that the easing happening there. I might just go in here and just taper this down just slightly, and we'll sell the ease with an echo. Right? Let's not holding down shift. Let's just do that. Let's see what that looks like. Much better. Nice. And so let's add the echo effect. So we're going to save that. And we're actually going to add the echo effect to both the ball and the hammer, right? So I'm going to go, remember we have it on our projectile layer. I'm going to select that layer. Hold on, sorry. Let me hide the keyframes there. We're going to go back to our dope sheet. And I'm going to select that projectile layer, go up to the effect and copy and paste it to both the ball and the hammer. Ooh, let's paste that there. And then let's watch. And let's give that hammer a little bit more of a, look at that ball go. In fact, the ball moves a little bit too quickly, right? So let's move this keyframe right there because the ball was moving before it could get hit. There we go. That looks good. We just had to adjust the timing of the keyframe so that the ball actually was getting hit by the hammer. Nice. And so the only other thing I want to do is maybe increase the amount here, 15. And let's slow down. Let's slow down this. So I'm just going to select all of these, and I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click and drag. And then we're going to watch it again. Nice. And I'm going to drag this out a little bit to slow this ball down so we can actually see it on screen. Probably drag it right to there. So it doesn't have to go super fast, but it goes fast enough to where you could tell it gets hit and then knocked out of the park, right? So I'm going to just kind of slow it down a little bit. Slow that timing down. And then let's just change the easing of that ball because all of a sudden it is overshooting, which we definitely do not want. So it's always important that when you change the timing like that, you look at the graph editor as well. And you can see as I start to change the curve, the distance between these starts to change, right? So if I play it back now, it slows down too quick there. So I want to accelerate that. And then what you can do is just move this off. You can move the ball off screen even further. But let's try this first. There we go. Not bad, not bad. Let's tighten this up right there. All right, I don't mind it. I'm going to just keep that a little bit faster. I'm going to go back to the original there. I'm going to save it. And then what I'm going to do is to just kind of make this slower part. I'm going to, don't worry about that. That was just an accidental click. I'm just going to take this ball and I'm going to just make sure I'm over top of the last keyframe, and I'm just going to move that over a little bit more. And that way, I really don't want it slowing down. I really don't. Let's just move this keyframe in slightly more then, just adjusting the timing. And this is all animation really is. It's just timing, adjusting timing, and going back to the keyframes. Timing, keyframes. There we go. Drag that back in slightly. Nice. And right on the money, it's 8:30 right now, but we have gotten through bounce, squash and stretch, and impact. Now, I apologize again that this was a little bit of a rough stream, but if you guys have questions, please let me know. I want to go over what your deliverables are again, right? Let's just do this real quick before we log off. I want to see the following. I want to see squash and stretch. I want to see impact. And I want to see the bounce or weight. Right? Now, out of each one of these ones, I want, except for impact. Impact doesn't count because impact is just kind of a one and done type thing. But I want to see on anything that bounces, I want to see 3 to 4 bounces. Okay, you guys? I don't want to see 1. I don't want to see 2. I want 3 or 4 bounces. Make sure that everything either has motion blur or an echo effect. Okay? And then, except for like that heavy ball, right? There are certain ones I didn't put it on, so make sure you're paying attention to that. And then I also want to draw to the fact that here it says I want it to have one MP4 file that contains all 3 scenes, right? Vimeo setting from the media encoder. Also, don't forget that when we were looking at the reference, right? Because remember, I dragged the reference into here. I want you guys to make sure you have a title. I want titles, okay? And make it look like this, right? I have a title right here that has I put the rulers on, right? That I make sure they're lined up here so that if I zoom in really close, I can see that everything is fully lined up on the corners, on the edges, right? Fully lined up on these edges. So that way I know that they're equal distance apart this way, and they're also equally lined up on the edges there because they are all separate. They're all separate layers, right? Remember the thing I said about the null. If you have things animated and you need to move things around or update them using the nulls, right? And so then total things. Let's just total them up, tally them up right here. So it should have a title that fades in and out. And then I want impact scene. And then I want the squash and stretch. And then I want the bounce. Either, any order, I don't care. And then any balls, anything that bounces, I want 3 to 4 of those bounces. And then adding blur or echo. Okay, you guys? And then 1 deliverable, 1 video, 1 MP4. All right? Look at that, save that, put that into your thing. I made sure that I put it in red on the module because I want you guys to start getting used to, right, handing things in the way I'm asking them from you. So, any questions, you can ask me or reach out to Belle. But thank you guys for hanging in there, and good night.